The day I was fired over a turkey wrap, I knew my life was about to split wide open. I was sitting in my tiny windowless basement office at Vanguard Systems, surrounded by stacks of federal audit folders and the hum of fluorescent lights. It was 12 noon on a Tuesday, and I was quietly eating lunch while verifying federal compliance tags. I had spent 7 years as the invisible anchor of that company, tracking every dollar of our government grants. Nobody ever noticed me until something went wrong, and that was exactly how I liked it. Suddenly, the door swung open and Chloe walked in, smelling like expensive perfume and unearned authority. She was the HR director who treated employee policies like a personal power trip. She stared at my desk with complete disgust, pointing at my paper plate as if I had just brought toxic waste into the room. She told me that eating in an administrative workspace was a severe violation of company culture policies. I tried to explain that I was simply having a quiet lunch while working, but she refused to listen to reason. She demanded that I follow her to the executive suite immediately for a formal disciplinary meeting. When I walked into her office, a pre-printed termination letter was already sitting on the desk. Chloe smiled with cold satisfaction, telling me that my employment was terminated effective immediately for repeated workplace health violations. I did not cry, nor did I yell at her. I simply signed the paper, knowing that her petty desire to destroy me had just created a catastrophic problem for the entire executive leadership team. As I gathered my coat and walked down the hallway toward the elevators, I noticed something pinned to the main breakroom bulletin board. It was a copy of my security badge photo, printed in black ink with red marker scribbled across my face. Below my picture, someone had written that I was fired for illegal eating and warned staff never to rehire me. I stared at the poster for a few moments, realizing how desperate Chloe was to humiliate me. I took a deep breath, walked out the front door, and never looked back. When I arrived home, I opened my personal laptop and pulled up my private archive of contract records. Vanguard Systems had just secured 3 major Department of Energy grants worth over $80 million. What Chloe and the executive board did not realize was that I was explicitly named as the sole certified monitor in those federal agreements. Federal law required an active, credentialed monitor to maintain the legal validity of those funds. By firing me under an internal misconduct charge, they had automatically triggered a mandatory compliance freeze. The following morning, I sent a brief email to the Federal Grant Oversight Division to clarify my employment status. I stated neutrally that I was no longer serving as the named monitor for Vanguard Systems due to a sudden termination. Less than 20 minutes later, the agency responded and confirmed that all active grant funds were now officially frozen. They explained that without a credentialed monitor, Vanguard Systems was operating in direct violation of federal law. The dominoes were finally starting to fall, exactly as I had anticipated. By noon that same day, total panic erupted inside the corporate headquarters of Vanguard Systems. The chief operating officer, Douglas, received an automated notice that $80 million in funding had been locked down. He immediately called an emergency executive meeting, demanding to know why the compliance roster was completely unstaffed. Chloe tried to claim that my removal was a minor administrative detail that could be easily resolved. However, the legal department quickly realized that they were facing a catastrophic regulatory nightmare with no easy escape. They tried to replace me with a newly hired compliance manager who had only been with the company for 2 weeks. Unfortunately for them, the federal agency rejected the substitution because the new manager lacked the required federal certifications. Every hour that passed cost the company tens of thousands of dollars in frozen operational capital. The board members began turning on each other as they realized the magnitude of the mistake. Chloe was suddenly forced to account for her bizarre decision to terminate their most critical oversight officer. 3 days later, the federal agency sent an official letter demanding a formal explanation for my sudden termination. Douglas personally drafted a letter claiming my departure was due to routine workplace policy adjustments that had no impact on federal performance. However, the federal investigator replied with terrifying precision, noting that terminating a certified monitor over a lunch policy constituted internal misconduct. Per Section 17 of the master contract, the entire multi-million-dollar funding pipeline was officially suspended pending a full federal audit. While Vanguard Systems was rapidly collapsing under the weight of its own arrogance, I was busy building my own future. I officially registered my new independent consulting firm, Apex Regulatory Services, with the federal government. Because I had maintained a clean record and held unique federal credentials, I was immediately approved to consult for major energy contractors. I secured 2 new client retainers within 48 hours, earning more in a single week than I had made in 2 months at my old job. The federal audit team arrived at Vanguard Systems the following Monday morning to inspect every record in the building. Douglas and Chloe were forced to sit in a room for 6 hours while investigators tore through their compliance gaps. When the auditors asked for historical monitoring logs, they discovered that every single accurate file had been created and maintained by me. Without my signature on current records, Vanguard Systems was found guilty of massive contractual non-compliance across multiple federal accounts. The fallout from the investigation was swift, severe, and completely fatal to the leadership team. The board of directors held an emergency meeting and voted to remove Douglas from his position as chief operating officer. Chloe was quietly escorted out of the building by security 2 days later, her career completely ruined by her own petty cruelty. The news of the frozen grants quickly reached investors, causing the company's stock price to plummet and forcing them to cancel several upcoming projects. 2 weeks after my termination, the board of directors realized they had only one option left to save the company. They were legally required by the federal government to hire an independent external auditor to oversee their contract restoration plan. Because I was the only certified professional in the region without a conflict of interest, they were forced to contact my new firm. I calmly sent them a formal service proposal with a retainer fee that was 5 times my old salary. They had no choice but to accept my terms without changing a single line of the agreement. When I walked back into their executive boardroom as an independent consultant, the remaining managers sat in absolute silence. I did not boast, nor did I mention the humiliating poster they had put on the break room wall. I simply placed my contract on the table and informed them that my work would begin as soon as the first payment cleared my account. Today, my consulting firm flourishes while Vanguard Systems spends millions of dollars trying to repair the damage caused by a single foolish decision. Every afternoon at noon, I sit at my spacious desk overlooking the city and enjoy my lunch in complete peace. Power does not belong to the loudest voice in the room or the person holding a clipboard in HR. True power belongs to the people who understand the rules, keep precise records, and quietly build their own strength.